There's a punchline. I've known Terry for a long time. I'm just waiting for the punchline. It'll come later. Guys, welcome. Thank you for coming. There's a few people still on the district line, I think. And I want to thank Hannah as well, who stepped in at the last minute under difficult circumstances, so thanks to her. What we thought we'd do is show a few slides, because that's what seminars like this are all about. And try again. Do we have some slides? Well, we were going to have some slides. Right. What I thought would show a non-politically correct slide. This is a big risk of meeting women that you haven't been properly introduced to. What I thought we'd do is look at some... we've gone backwards, yeah. What we thought we'd do is look at some existing risks and what's going on there, and then look at some future risks, and then perhaps have a bit of a chat to see how we get on. So that's the programme for this morning. By the way, I don't know if anybody knows, but if you came in the reception on the ground floor this morning, there's a magazine rack on the left-hand side as you come in with 3 magazines, just help yourself. And Time magazine, which is free, help yourself. The headline is, "This baby could live to be 142 years old." So that's really the big risk today. Right. What I thought to do is look at some good risks and some bad risks. Some people, I'm a solicitor by training, and there are a few other lawyers in the room. There's a kind of misapprehension amongst non-lawyers about how difficult risks are. And I think it's important, before we look at risks, is just to quantify the seriousness. This is a bouncy castle, a picture of a bouncy castle, which represents a case about 3 or 4 years ago in the High Court. And it just really the case, I think, explains that that the courts are not regulators have a slightly different approach, but the courts are quite reasonable on risk. What happens is Mrs. Smith, I can't remember her name, has a 5-year-old child, and she rents a bouncy castle for a birthday party. And it says on the instructions when the bouncy castle turns up 2 things. Number 1, keep an eye on this bouncy castle at all times. And number 2, make sure that you don't have kids of different ages jumping down the bouncy castle. So the party starts, and she's busy making sandwiches in the garden, so she hasn't got 100% concentration on the bouncy castle. And the next door neighbour rings up and says, "Come, my little Jimmy, come and play as well." She doesn't ask his age, he happens to be 9 years old. But what are you going to say to the next door neighbour? No, you can't. So she says, of course. So the tragedy happens. The 9-year-old comes along, he slides down the bouncy castle. Unfortunately, he breaks the neck of a 5-year-old as he slides down. Very big tragedy. And it's really insurance companies suing each other. The mother gets sued for 2 or 3 million quid for not obeying the instructions on the bouncy castle instruction list. Goes to the High Court. The High Court judge says, "This is outrageous. You can't go around breaking necks of 5-year-old kids. Pay 2 million quid." And she goes to the Court of Appeal. And the Court of Appeal, I'm not going to use the phrase that the Court of Appeal uses, but it's to the equivalent of "things happen." You can use your own word for things. There is risk in life. Just calm down. It's Michael Winner approach to legal analysis. Bad things happen. So the fact that there are risks and sometimes it goes wrong, the courts, I wouldn't say are relaxed about it, but are kind of prepared to accept that sometimes you're not always responsible for things that go wrong, and the courts won't impose liabilities to do that. So I just wanted to kind of mention that before we get stuck into things, the dreadful things that can go wrong. Even though things can go wrong, it isn't necessarily anybody's fault. It's just life. So that's really the background to the risk issue. And I thought we might identify 2 sets of separate risks which are about to emerge in the next few months, as everybody in this room knows. One is risk to consumers, we'll come to that, and then risk to regulators. And the problem that we worry about is risk to regulators, because regulators have the power to make life miserable for the rest of us. And they do that to reduce the risks to themselves, not to protect the consumer necessarily, but to reduce risk to regulators. Now, nobody can read this slide. I don't expect you to, but when you take the print home, you'll see the bottom line is that risks at home, accident risks at home, cost around just a shade under 50 billion a year. So the way to reduce that kind of risk is to make sure that people don't have homes. I just thought that would be kind of the bottom line. It's ridiculous. Things are going to go wrong. Right. Now let's just look at the consumer member type approach to risk, which is the thing that's going to hit us come the revolution in April, which is a big risk for all of us. And as we know, at the moment, the FCA, DWP, Treasury, HMRC, Pensions Regulator are issuing documents fit to bust. I've got roughly a couple of hundred pages of documents, discussion documents, on what's going to happen with the new freedoms come in. DB schemes are particularly hit. I don't know if anybody's seen the HM Treasury guidance letter that we have to send to members, which is a draft letter which is out for discussion, which sets out in millimetres how thick the gutters have to be between the columns. I hope you're going to comply with this, because if you don't, dreadful things will happen to us. It's become absurd. So the question is, what do members want? Well, some of us will have been to the PPI. Anybody went to the PPI research paper, which was launched in January, about what people are going to do once the new freedoms come up. What do members want? They want high return, obviously. They want a guaranteed income, and they don't want any risk. Well, why wouldn't you? The question is, what's going to happen if they take a risk? And I just want to rehearse the story of the Barclay-Burke case. I don't know if any people remember Barclay. Barclay-Burke's a small SIP provider up in Leicester, I think. And they get a guy writes in. It's slightly more complicated than this, but I'm skipping it. The guy writes in, he says, I've got 30,000 in my pension scheme with Pru or something. I'd like to give it to you, and then I want to invest it in Cambodian forestry project, which will show returns of 15% guarantee for the foreseeable future. So they write back and they say, we'll have to take your money, but A, we're not investment advisors, B, this looks a super high risk investment, and we really are a bit scared about this, and 3, sign this form saying if it all goes wrong, nothing to do with us. So he signs the form, he invests, they put money where he directs them to invest the money, and of course within 48 hours the company's gone bust. Goes to the Financial Ombudsman Service, who give him all his money back, plus 500 quid for distress and inconvenience. The point of the story is that once these things begin to happen, the regulatory framework is such that it's deep pocket law. In other words, it doesn't really matter whose fault it was, or that the people won't take responsibility for their own affairs. The regulatory process will be such that you and I are going to be held responsible for the faults. That's very good news for people like lawyers, which is not a bad thing. It's a bit of a pain for trustees and the rest of us. So it doesn't matter what the law is, the fact is that people will cause problems. The second thing is that clients, bless them, are a bit of a mixed blessing. And I want to show, you won't know this, but the US government issued a document last week, nothing to do with what's going on in the UK, to do with the fact that people in the States don't know what to do with their money when they retire. They get it paid in a lump sum, and they invest it quite badly. And there's a government accounting office document, just a 100-page document, which is virtually word for word what's going on in the UK. And this video, which some of us have seen before, kind of illustrate this in a way which I haven't seen elsewhere. So forgive me if we show the next slide. This is quite a long clip, but hopefully it'll ring a few bells.
So what can I help you with?
I would like to know if I can retire in 5 years.
I'd be happy to help you determine a suitable retirement age.
I don't want to pay fees.
Well, we don't know if we will do any business yet. Let me learn more about you to determine if I can help. It costs nothing to talk to me.
Good, because I really don't want to pay fees.
How old are you now?
45.
And you would like to retire at 50?
Yes.
Do you have any children?
No.
What do you have saved for retirement?
I have $100,000 in my IRA and $5,000 in savings.
Any other retirement funds?
No. Should I buy gold?
Well, gold is often part of a well-diversified portfolio.
I want to buy gold. Who said to buy gold? And Google.
We will look at that as an option when considering your overall allocation. May I just ask you a few more questions so that I may make suitable recommendations?
I think I should invest in no-load index funds. They have low expenses, and I don't like to pay fees.
Index funds are inexpensive, but offer no professional management or thorough diversification. They can be very risky.
I don't want anything risky. I just want to retire in 5 years.
I want to help you retire, but you should not use your IRA funds until you are 60 to avoid a penalty.
Why do you charge your clients a penalty?
I wouldn't charge you a penalty. The government would.
I need a new car. I will use the money in my IRA.
Your IRA is intended to give you income in retirement. It is wise to save it for the future. If you make a large withdrawal now to buy a rapidly depreciating asset, a third of your money will go to taxes and you will have no money to retire or buy a car ever again.
Well then, the IRA does not sound like a good deal at all.
It is a good deal when used properly in a sound retirement plan. Do you have any other expenses coming in the next few years?
My son is going to college next year.
You told me you did not have any children.
I didn't think that was any of your business.
But you would be able to provide you with sound advice.
Okay, we have one child, a son.
Where is your son planning on going to school?
He wants to go to Harvard. We are thinking he will get a scholarship. He is very smart. He has a B plus average.
He will likely not get into Harvard with a B plus average, much less get a scholarship. Do you have any money saved for his education?
I can use the money in my IRA.
I have already advised you to save your IRA for retirement income, and the cost of Harvard is over $50,000 per year. You do not have enough money for that.
He will get financial aid.
How much do you and your husband make?
Why do you want to know?
So I can tell you whether or not you will get financial aid.
We make $200,000.
You will not get any financial aid.
I will ask my accountant for help.
Your accountant cannot get you financial aid. We should be realistic and look at other options.
I don't want an annuity. I hate annuities.
An annuity has nothing to do with education. And why do you hate annuities?
Because Susie Orman says they are evil. She said you would try to sell me an annuity. I hate annuities. Susie Orman, Susie Orman, Susie Orman, Susie Orman. I don't like to pay fees. What are your CD rates? I like CDs. They have FDIC insurance. What are your CD rates?
Less than 1%. A CD will not help you reach your goals. After taxes and inflation, you have a negative return. You will lose money.
But they are free and guaranteed.
Guaranteed to lose money.
I will have to ask my brother about that.
Is your brother in the financial services industry?
No, he is an electrician. But he has a subscription to Money Magazine.
So, you value the opinion of an electrician over a certified financial planner. I think we are done here. Would you care for a lollipop? There is no fee for it. The lollipop is free. Anything else?
Do you offer mortgages?
We do. It is a great time to refinance.
I don't want to refinance. My husband and I are thinking of getting a condo in Florida. You can't lose money with real estate.
You cannot possibly get a condo in Florida and afford to retire in 5 years. Also, you would need money for a down payment, and you have $5,000 in savings.
I have money in my IRA.
Now I'm positive you are just not listening to me. That money is for future income only. Do you hear me? You horrible, horrible woman.
I have socially responsible mutual funds. I feel like I should project admirable values when selecting my investments. Do you have socially responsible mutual funds?
I would be more concerned about adding money to a sensible retirement plan and less concerned about whether or not you own a fraction of a share of Philip Morris. Your retirement savings is not adequate for anything that you have planned, and your expectations are highly unreasonable. Short of wizardry, there is nothing I can do to help you reach your outlandish goals.
If you cannot help me, you must not be very good at your job. Perhaps I should go talk to Merrill Lynch. They have good commercials. I like the E-Trade baby too. He's cute.
David Garst, Dino Carfora, Mark Sobel, John Kleiman, Harry Potter, and Warren Buffett together could not help you on your disastrous financial quest.
Are you saying I can't retire in 5 years?
I'm saying I'm surprised your pants are on correctly. I recommend you actually work until normal retirement age, not buy a new car or home, not send your son to school, use your savings to get him fat, then chop him up and eat him with macaroni and cheese during your retirement years, because that is all you will be able to afford.
Can you help me open a free CD for my daughter?
Please get out of my office.
It goes on a bit. We'll skip it there. Okay. Of course, none of us have members like that, but there are going to be issues with people like that. And when they're given the freedom, most people would be fine with it, but a lot of people will struggle with it. So, sorry, I think we're just right. So, what are the risks for scheme? Most of us in the room know what the risk for schemes are. They are the people like that who are going to come and take the money and then regret what they've done. We've got all the normal risk, which I've just repeated on the slide, which is longevity and investments and all the kind of stuff that we all know about, inflation stuff, which may or may not happen. I just want to mention one of them, which I'll come back to in a moment, which is political and regulatory risk, which I think is probably the highest at the moment compared with all the others. The others we kind of vaguely got a handle on, kind of, but we're going to struggle with. And I want to come back to that in a minute. I'm going to skip it there because time's getting on. I want to press on with the regulatory risk. How about risk management at the moment? Most of it is done, I'm pleased to say, well, there are lots of ways of managing risk. One is to just take advice. And that means even if the advice is wrong, by and large, you can show to whoever's been claiming that you've been sensible. It doesn't always work. One of the risks at the moment is very prolix judges. I don't know if you've seen any of the judgments that have come out recently in Merchant Navy case and in the IBM cases, but they're hundreds of pages long, unreadable. The judges just got a diarrhea of some verbal diarrhea. The IBM case was quite interesting, which I won't go into the details of the case, but a lot of it depended on who said what to whom in the mid-1980s. And the actors there are some actors in the room I know who are noble people, all of them, were unable to tell the judge what they said on the 3rd of January 1982 at 8:30 in the morning in a meeting. Because most of them are now 90, 95. And the judge was extremely rude to them and saying that they hadn't really got their act together. So trying to remember what you said 40 years ago when you gave advice, if you're an advisor in the room, you need to keep a record of that. We can change the regulatory framework by law, which we don't do very well. Most of us in the room just kind of take what we get thrown at. We have insurance. Op2 here is the big protection mechanism. We'd actually comply with the law, which would be a bit of a pain, but we could do that. And then we have exclusion and liability indemnity clauses in the documentation. So by and large, that's a conclusion. The bottom one is the thing that's the front of the FT for the last couple of weeks, following the HSBC problems, and that is that people are now beginning, not so much in pension funds, but certainly in big corporates and certainly in banks, to think twice about taking the job on in the first place. Now, I think that's a counsel of despair, and as we said earlier on, if you ignore the regulators, by and large, the legal risks are pretty low. So not doing it, I think, is probably a counsel of defeat, which I don't really recommend. But it's an option. Just pack it in. All right. See how we're doing here. Right. What's going to happen now? What's going to happen now is that the salesmen of forests in Cambodia are out and about. And they are about to persuade people who are coming at 55, 60, 65 that the money that they're about to be able to take out of their pension scheme is pretty good, and they should go and buy this forest here. It's a very nice forest, but whether it belongs to anybody or whether you can do anything with it is a big question. And I think everybody in the industry is talking about this, nothing very new. We all know there's going to be some pretty horrific scandals about that. Secondly, the next big scandal is annuity choices. Most people now in DB schemes, or even in D schemes, workplace DC schemes, have automatic survivors' benefits. In other words, if you have a spouse, a wife, or a husband, you drop dead, they will normally get a pension of some description. You've always been able to do this, but not in the same way. Once the revolution comes, husbands mostly husbands, will transfer their money out to a DC scheme. If they buy an annuity, which they may not, but if they do buy an annuity, they'll buy it for themselves only, because it looks good. And then the spouse, when he drops dead, the spouse will come along in 3, 4, 5, 10 years' time and say to the employer, you knew perfectly well that I was around, that we loved each other, he would have wanted me to have a pension. And you didn't do anything to make sure I was going to get a pension. That dilemma is going to go in spades. It was an issue perhaps 25, 30 years ago. There was a big, I won't go through the case law about it, but there was a big case 34 years ago. That problem is going to come again. Survivors are going to be cut out quite a lot, and they're going to be pretty cross. What else is going on? This is a picture, by the way, not many people here, well, I hope nobody here recognises it. This is a picture of Ford Open Prison outside Brighton. Very nice prison. It's got a swimming pool, library, gym, everything like that. It's quite a comfortable prison. Pinson Masons, by the way, this is just an advert for Pinson Masons. You can buy PPP, you pay money, you can have private health insurance. Pinson Masons, you pay £100, you get private prison insurance. You go to a prison of your choice, you get your own cell. Well, anyway, it's just an opportunity for Op2 to get into a new market. What can we do? There's going to be a change in regulatory approach. Regulators are getting much tougher. I want to come on to regulation in a minute, the next slide. Regulators deny this. In fact, there's a report out yesterday from the FCA. They deny they apply hindsight. They are misguided. They always apply hindsight. We're going to look at the problems with derivatives. As people go into longevity swaps and index and inflation swaps, control of trustees, the exposure of trustees to those swaps is going to be worse in a couple of years' time once the European directive making us a counterparty bites, and we can be in real serious trouble with regulators when that happens. So the FCA is not a friend. And just a new thing, if PensionWise is coming on board to advise us all about what we should do with the new freedoms. I don't know if you're not happy with PensionWise, you don't appeal to the pensions regulator or to the pensions ombudsman or to any of that stuff. You go off now to the parliamentary ombudsman. Why? I've no idea. But it's just another additional problem to think about. I just want to mention this guy. I don't know if people in here remember him. This is Brian Levison. Brian Levison was the judge in the telephone hacking inquiry. Last month, he produced a report, he's done hacking, obviously quite well known, but he's the president of this Queen's Bench Division of the High Court. And last month, he produced a report on criminal justice in the UK, which is a very interesting report, very long. But on page 3 of that report, he refers to the growth in law, which I'm going to come to in a minute. Most of us in pensions know that 30, 40 years ago, there were about 200 or 300 pages of revenue guidance, practice, things like that. Now we're up to about the 80,000. Simon Freeman's in the front, he'll give you the exact number. Call it 80,000 pages of regulation. I just want to read a quote from Brian Levison's report about the growth in other areas of law, which, and if you think it's bad in pensions, it's bad in other areas. He's looking at criminal law. He says, between 1989 and 2009, Parliament approved approved just over 100 criminal justice bills. And more than 4,000 offences were added to the statute book. Halsbury's Statutes of England, which is the kind of encyclopedia of all the laws of England, it takes a small wall, now has 5 volumes devoted to criminal law. Volume 1 of Halsbury's Statutes covers 637 years of criminal law, from 1351 to 1988. So that's one volume covering 637 years. From 1989 to 2013, that's 24 years, there's another 4 volumes. So we've had, in 24 years, 4 times as many pages as we needed in the previous 600 and something years. So you think we're struggling, everybody's struggling. But it's going to get worse, not better, because we've invented word processors. And the bottom line of that is that the problems that are going to emerge is that anybody who's got insurance or has got a deep pocket, like pension funds or Optu, is going to be hit. Right, that's Levison. What else? Regulatory grandstanding. All regulators feel they need to show off. It's going to get worse. We're seeing it at the moment with the FCA, a lot of pushback with the FCA, but at the moment the House of, anybody watches Margaret Hodge on Department of Work and Pensions, and in the Public Accounts Committee, you can see what's going on there, and we're going to see a lot more of it. So, what's the bottom line? Bottom line is, if you have a problem, try and get in front of a judge. Hopefully not Nick Warren, who goes on a bit, but judges, by and large, are much more forgiving than regulators. So if it's a legal problem, by and large, judges are okay. This is the new incoming Pensions Ombudsman, Anthony Arter, who's head of pensions at Eversheds, who's coming on board. If you get a chance, go on YouTube and look at Anthony Arter being interviewed by the Department of Work and Pensions Select Committee. You would be ashamed, not of him, but of the Department of Work and Pensions Committee. The interview is gratuitously offensive, in my opinion. But it shows what regulators feel they need to do to maintain their credibility. The third thing is that with Optu and lots of other support, trustee risk is actually very manageable. It's going to be a problem, while we're aware of the problems, but it is manageable. The new freedoms are going to increase risk for everybody, and everybody needs cover. This is a sales job for Optu. I just want to show, I think it's the next slide. Yeah, in a minute. That, of course, what we don't know is what's going to come around the corner. We just don't know what other risks that we haven't quite identified are going to be. And I just wanted to show this slide, this clip, which some of us will have seen already, to do with the Norwegian approach to pension risk, which I thought was quite illuminating. It's one way. Just hope Legal & General don't copy that. Okay, guys. I'm done, Chairman. Shall we move on to the next thing? Thanks very much. Okay.
That's